The word and the impressions. Consciousness sleeps in our larynx. We are unconscious of the words. We need to become totally conscious of the word. There are times when to speak is a transgression, and there are times when to keep silent is also a transgression. It is said that the silent is gold. We say that there are criminal silences. It is as bad to speak when one has to be silent as it is to be silent when it is necessary for one to speak. Like a flower full of colors but without aroma are the beautiful but sterile words of the one who does not behave according to what he or she says. It is urgent to stop the mechanical words. It is necessary to speak with precision in conscious and opportune form. We need to become conscious of the word. There exists responsibility in the words, and to judge with the verb is a sacrilege. No one has the right to judge somebody else. It is absurd to calumniate the neighbor. It is stupid to murmur about the other's life. The injurious words fall sooner or later over us, like a ray of revenge. The calumnious words always return over the one that has pronounced them, transformed in stones that wound. The external events never will be as important as the way of how one reacts before them. Do you remain serene before the insulter? Do you receive with pleasure the unpleasant manifestations of your fellow men? How did you react before the infidelity of the beloved one? Did you allow yourself to be carried away by the venom of jealousy? Did you kill? Are you in jail? The hospitals, the cemeteries, and the jails are full of sincere mistaken ones that reacted in absurd form before the external events. The best weapon that a man can use in life is the correct psychological state. One can disarm beasts and unmask traitors through the appropriated internal states. The internal mistaken states convert ourselves in defenseless victims of the human perversity. Learn to confront the most unpleasant events of the practical life with an appropriated internal attitude. Do not become identified with any event. Remember that everything passes. Learn to see the events in life like a movie, and you will receive the benefits. Do not forget that events without any value could lead you to the misfortune if you do not eliminate from your psyche the mistaken internal states. Each external event needs undoubtedly the appropriated bill, that is to say, the precise psychological state. The word has to come from the heart, not from the different psychological aggregates that we have. With profound pain, I realize that when somebody speaks, the words unfortunately come not from the depths of the being, but from any inhuman psychological aggregate. The worth that comes exclusively from the essence would have nothing to object, for it would be pure and perfect. However, people have different psychological aggregates, very developed. Therefore, when somebody speaks from the tribune de la eloquence, almost all of the time, they do so with the intention to use the irony against somebody, to humiliate somebody, to insult, and so on. That is to say, the word is not born from the pure essence. It does not come from the being, but from, rather, the depths of any I, and for this reason, it is not spontaneous. It is not pure. It does not produce creative effect. Normally, the words among the people have the origin of the entrails of any psychological aggregate, like envy, anger, self-esteem, pride, presumption, assumption, ambition, and so forth. With pain, I see that they do not come from the entrails of the being, and that is very unfortunate. When the word comes from the depths of the being, the word is full of plenitude and inner beauty. However, when the word comes from the entrails of any psychological aggregate, it is conditioned by that I. It doesn't have any elasticity or ductility. It does not enjoy the plenitude. It is not integral, and produces discord and all sorts of problems. The devout ones go to their meetings in order to receive a balsam, a consolation for their painful heart. However, what consolation could they get? How an institution could progress if we continue with this behavior? The tendency to react that people have is horrible and absurd. People do not own their own psychological processes. If they are contradicted, they react, always reacting against everything. Do not forget that we live in the physical world and that there exists 3 classes of nourishments. You already know the first nourishment. It is food. Besides, it seems a lie, but it is less important. As proof of this, this is the fact that one can live without eating many times until within a period of 1 month. Mahatma Gandhi used to last 3 months without ailments. This nourishment enters through the mouth and goes to the stomach. The second class of nourishment is the air. It is the breathing that is related with the fossas nasales, or nasales and lungs. We hardly would live even 3 or 4 minutes without breathing. People normally can stay a minute without breathing, but after that comes the stroke. With training, we can reach 2 or 3 or 4 minutes, but very rare are the cases of those who can live after being without oxygen for more than that time. This indicates that the second nourishment is even more important than the first one. Finally comes the third nourishment that is even more important. I want to point emphatically to impressions. If the food could not impress the human organism, the intestinal lobule would not work, nor the stomach, and we would die. If the air could not impress the lungs and the blood, the air would be useless. Yes, my dear brothers and sisters, the third nourishment is the most important, because no one could exist, not even for a single second, without the nourishment of the impressions. Every nourishment needs to pass through a transformation. The nourishment related with the stomach needs to pass through a transformation. This is possible thanks to the digestive system. The nourishment related with the breathing has a vehicle of transformation, the lungs. However, there are not lungs that could transform the third nourishment. It is necessary to create that organ. Everything that reaches the mind comes as impressions. You are listening, and you see a man who is speaking through a microphone. And all of this is a conjunct of impressions that reach the mind. All the emotions and passions, everything around, come to us in form of impressions. The air is transformed through the lungs. The food is transformed through the stomach. Air and food are transformed in principles that are vital for the organism. However, unfortunately, the impressions are not transformed when they reach the mind because they haven't been digested. The undigested impressions that reach the eyes and the mind are transformed into new psychological aggregates instead. That is to say, new eyes, and this is very serious. It is necessary to digest impressions. So how do we do this? Through the superlative consciousness of the being. Normally, the impressions reach the mind and one reacts. If somebody insults us, we react with desire or revenge. If somebody offers a cup of wine, we react with desires of drinking. If a person of the opposite sex tempts us, we feel desire of fornication. We always react before the impacts of the external world. This is very serious. This feeds the ego. It creates it. In the assemblies, I have seen how the people hurt one another. One says a word and the other feels eluded and reacts violently, saying something worse. Sometimes what they say is not anything vulgar, but subtle, decent, and accompanied with a smile. However, at the bottom carries the frightful venom of the violent reaction. So, there is no love among people who have forgotten their own being and only live in the world of the ego, in the world of the reaction. When one forgets their own being and reacts violently, when one forgets their own being and reacts violently. If one forgets their own being before a bottle of wine, they end up drunk. If one forgets their own being before a person of the opposite sex, they end up fornicating. In the one who forgets their inner profound being before an insulter, one ends up insulting. The most serious thing in life is to forget oneself. Therefore, it is necessary to transform the impressions, and this is only possible, and it could only be possible, by interposing the being between the different vibrations of the external world and the mind. When one interposes the consciousness between the impressions of the mind, it is obvious that the impressions are transformed into forces and powers of a superior order. Normally, the impressions are formed by a very heavy hydrogen, the hydrogen 48. When one interposes the consciousness between the impressions and the mind, the hydrogen 48 is transformed into hydrogen 24, which is half of that. This helps as nourishment for the astral body. In the same form, the leftover of the hydrogen 24 is transformed into hydrogen 12, another division in half, and this helps for the nourishment of the mental body. And finally, the leftover of the hydrogen 12 is transformed into hydrogen 6, this octave higher that helps as nourishment for the causal body. However, if one does not transform the impressions, these ones are transformed into new psychological aggregates, new eyes. We have to transform impressions using the consciousness, and it is very easy to interpose the consciousness between the impressions and the mind. In order to receive the impressions with the consciousness and not with the mind, only as necessary is only necessary to not forget ourselves in a determined moment, from moment to moment. If somebody in any moment says something that hurts the self-esteem, our pride, our vanity, in those moments only the being has to be in us and with us. We have to concentrate on the being. So only the being, the superlative consciousness of the being, will be the one that receives the impressions and digests them correctly. In this form, we are avoiding the horrible reactions that everybody has before the impacts that comes from the external world. In this form, the impressions are completely transformed, and once transformed, they develop ourselves marvelously. My friends, I repeat, do not repeat the mistake of reacting violently against the neighbor. Desist once and forever from the horrible tendency of reacting. If somebody says something, so be it. Why does their neighbor have to react? Everybody is free to say what they want. About myself, I affirm what I have to say, and if somebody refutes me, I just keep silent. I've already said what I've needed to say, that is all. Why do you impose your opinion by force? It is absurd. To impose the opinion by force is to react. It is the result of reacting. It is the very reaction of the ego. That behavior is abominable. It has created problems in all the institutions of the world. Everywhere, the tribune is used for insulting, hurting, attacking others with words, and this is producing confusion in many organizations. Inferential peace. Samael Aun Weor.